The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
It is mailbag day, everybody. That's what you got to do when you got nothing else going on. You ask some questions and you get a show out of it. That's right. You guys are content. Congratulations. I'm letting you in a little podcasting secret that is definitely not a secret that I'm calling a secret, and that is mailbag shows, which I'm doing right now, are code for I got nothing, man. I don't have topics right now. It's the All-Star layoff. Luckily, things will turn a little bit in our favor. Tomorrow, we can actually do a preview of what's coming up after the All-Star break a little bit, because Thursday, we're going to have some DFS action on the pod. We got the great Micah Patria coming back to get us prepped for the return to NBA action, and then we'll have games again, and that'll be all in swell. And it started to remind me, as I was sitting here thinking, man, I got like 3 days without games where I have to come up with podcast content. And it started to remind me of the off season, and I became sad. But luckily, we're not there yet. Fear not, everybody. We are still a good ways from the off season. We are officially 70% of the way through the NBA season, at least certainly by days. That's where we're at. And most teams are in that neighborhood as well. So it's stretch run time. Make no mistake. We are past the only 2 months left portion of the proceedings. Games return on the 21st. And then you got what? 21st to the 27th is 1 week. To March 6th is 2. 13th, 20th, 27th, 3rd. What do we got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks left of the whole season once the games come back. So we are definitely down the stretch run now, which means you do have to adjust your strategy a little bit, and that'll probably be something we talk about a little bit more on tomorrow's podcast. We get into stretch run strategy here on Fantasy NBA Today. Today, however, is mailbag day. So welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Dan Vespers. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation, and also brought to you by our title sponsor here at Hoop Ball, the great, the mighty, the caffeinating Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, our good buddies over at hawaiianisles.com. Check them out. I was trying to sell them this weekend among some friends of mine. I talked about being up in the mountains on yesterday's show, and my good buddies were drinking Starbucks coffee, and they were like, it's fine. It's all right. And I said, you know what? If you're going to blow cash like that, and you're going to get Starbucks brand market coffee, which I don't actually know how much that is. I'm looking it up on Amazon as we talk about it. That's more than Hawaiian Isles. The Starbucks House Blend is $11 and some odd cents, I believe, for a 20-ounce bag. So now I got to make sure that I get my numbers right. And Hawaiian Isles, the Kona coffee, is $7.95, I believe. Is that for the same size? I don't know. I might be getting this wrong. They come out. They compare pretty positively, and Hawaiian Isles will blow Starbucks out of the water. It's not even a competition, so you got to try it out. HawaiianIsles.com is the website. Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee is the name of the company, at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter. If you have any questions or just want to talk fantasy sports, those are our guys and gals over on the islands where we all want to be. Oh, I want to be. Although I did have fun in the snow. I know that's not really the reason you go to Hawaii. It's not snow, but I enjoyed myself. But man, Hawaii's amazing. And you might as well get your coffee from there, because you know what? It's like that Happy Cows commercial, right? If your beans are happy, your coffee's probably going to be better. So mailbag stuff. That's what's on tap for today. We got some nice replies. I think we got about 11 questions coming in on a quick midday request. As I said, recording the mailbag show tonight, as I wrote in yesterday's tweet. It's hard, by the way, to do podcasts where you revert to different days by a day it's not actually currently is. Does that make sense? This is Tuesday's episode. I'm recording it late on Monday night, but I am speaking as though it's Tuesday. So when I say yesterday, in my mind, I go to Sunday, but for you, you should go to Monday. Doesn't matter. That's not your problem. We requested questions in the late afternoon. We got plenty of them. in time for the show, so let's just jump right into it, and we'll work our way through the week of slightly shorter podcasts. And these are in no particular order. This is just how Twitter organized them. I have no idea why they came out this way. It's not chronological. I think it might have something to do with those that I have interacted with before or potentially followed back. I don't understand Twitter. Twitter remains a mystery to me, the algorithms and how it sorts things, but we're just going to read them from top to bottom, so I apologize. You may have actually written your question first, and it might get answered last. It has nothing to do with how I feel about you as a human being or as a Twitter persona. This is just this is how they listed it. I don't know. So Jackson, one of our longtime listeners, Dan, I've been playing Roto for 2 years now, and I still can't figure out the strategy behind playing games cap. For example, I'm almost maxed out at power forward, but I still need the rebounds and occasional blocks. What should I do? So here's what I've done for this particular thing, and this might not work for you guys, and I'll offer strategies for a couple different methods here. What I've done is, because I'm generally the commissioner of most of my Roto leagues, I got tired of people doing things too slowly, and I said, "Hey, you guys want me to take over? I'll be your commissioner." And they were like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great. Somebody else do this work." And then I was able to adjust some settings. So what I've done is I've actually eliminated the specific positions, and I've turned it into 3 guard spots, 3 forward spots, 2 center, and 2 utility spots with games caps related to how many of those are starting. So it's a 90 per position. So 270 guard games, 270 forward games, 180 both of center and utility. That's a lot easier, by the way. And it makes a lot of sense because, for guys that should have multi-position eligibility, Paul George, who's played shooting guard, small forward, and power forward this year, but apparently not enough to qualify at power forward in most leagues, but maybe enough in some, you're not really worried about that. He's either a forward or a guard or both, or center, or all 3. I don't know if there's anybody that's all 3. And so you're not worried so much about, how many power forward games you have left. You just have forward games. It doesn't totally solve the problem, but it does make it a lot easier to budget this stuff. For those of us that don't have 9,000 hours to just move guys around every day to make sure that you are keeping up in all of your spots. And that's lesson number 2. If you can't change the settings of your league to make life a little bit simpler, you really need to be paying close attention to this stuff right from the second week of the year. And I know that sounds crazy, but it makes your life so much simpler down the line. If you have, for instance, a league where you have a couple of your guards get hurt, if you are already behind in that department, you really put yourself in a tight spot. So to me, you always have to be on top of this stuff. If you have a particularly healthy power forward, as it sounds like Jackson does in this situation, you can still move that guy around. I would presume he also has eligibility at some other position, either small forward or center. But even if he doesn't, you could throw him into your utility spot. You just want to make sure that all of your positions are relatively close to one another in terms of how close you are to approaching your games cap. Because what's happened here with our friend Jackson is that he's running out of his big man slots, and he needs big man statistics. That's tough. That means that you need to now use basically your utility slots, if you have them in your league, need to be big men, because that's one way you can still get more power forward or center games played, is to throw those guys into a utility slot. Or you need to be looking for guards that produce more forwardy type statistics, like a Patrick Beverley who blocks shots and rebounds, or let's see, who else fits that mold? Guards that rebound and block shots. That's our $20,000 pyramid question of the day. I'll take guards who block shots and rebound for $400, Alex. I'm looking at the wrong team. I'm pretty sure I have a team where I have a few guys that fit this mold. So a guy like a Chris Middleton. No, he's averaging about 6 rebounds on the year. He doesn't block many shots, but he has guard eligibility, and he does rebound. Doesn't shoot the ball all that well, but the other stuff is right. Patrick Beverley, who I already mentioned, he's been blocking shots and rebounding lately in particular. It's pretty easy to figure this out. You go to whatever the player pool is in whatever league you might be in, Yahoo, ESPN, what have you, and you search by guard, and you pull up their season numbers, and then you just sort by rebounds. And this year, of all guards in the NBA, Russell Westbrook, Ben Simmons, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic, Harden, DeRozan, Slow-Mo. These are the guys that lead the league. Middleton, I mentioned. And if you're looking for a guy that does both, it would be Slow-Mo, who's actually not that heavily owned because of how many injuries he's had lately. But he's a guard that rebounds and blocks shots and doesn't do much else. But he'll get you those categories. Harden has actually been blocking some shots this year. Unusual, true. Yes, Ben Simmons, obviously, this is a guy that's up near the top of the list. If you're looking for someone that might be floating around on a waiver wire, Lonzo Ball maybe falls into that category. There aren't that many else that really block a ton of shots. You could sort by that department as well. And then you're looking at Bazemore was one. Maybe his minutes will trend back up again. He didn't rebound a ton, but he was blocking a decent number of shots. Andre Iguodala is blocking shots. He's getting you about 4 rebounds a game. Not horrible. So those guys are out there. Danny Green, Klay Thompson. They are few and far between. But these are the guys that you can then play in your guard slot to try to give you... They're not going to boost you in those categories, but what they do by getting you, we'll call them sufficient rebounds and blocks, is they don't pull you down the way that a lot of guards do, right? Because if you're looking at guards that maybe don't rebound as much. Let's say, I don't know, like a De'Aaron Fox, who's at 3.7 rebounds per game. We can go farther down the list to heavily owned guards that don't rebound all that much. How about my boy, Darren Collison? He's a horrible rebounding guard. He's averaging under 3 per game, despite all of his other stats being really, really good. That's a guard that actually pulls you down in rebounds and blocks. So that makes your life tough. All of this circles around to the fact that you just need to be on top of it right from the get-go. You can't just leave a guy in one slot all year just because he's healthy, because other guys on your team aren't, and you need to make sure that those positions are keeping up, even if you have to dial back one of the spots where you do have healthy guys. So that's believe it or not, that's actually the short answer to the games cap strategy. The other note is always watch averages in your games cap league. Don't worry about who's in front of you or behind you in totals, because you guys might not match in games played, and you might not match in games played at each position. If you really want to dig deep, you go to the other teams in your league and you see where they are above or below in their games cap. So like Jackson, for instance, someone might be looking at his team and saying, oh, well, he's basically at a power forward games played right now. That means he's probably going to kind of peter out in rebounds and blocks and other power forward-y statistics, and I could actually gain ground on him just by holding steady. Although I don't want to give other teams more credit than they deserve. That's really some deep dive stuff in Roto, and I love it. That's how you get a little edge. Jackson did have a second question, so we'll move along to that now. Derek White, what do you think he can do? Can he keep up this high level of production that he was having prior to his injury? For a couple of weeks, he was actually inside the top 50. Is that sustainable? If not, what's his true value? My answer to this short answer is yes. I think he will sustain solid value the rest of the year. He is very clearly the engine for that San Antonio team. When they were without a healthy Derek White, they were flailing. They got him back, and they played a whole heck of a lot better. He went down, and then they started flailing again a little bit. I know they're 6-4 in their last 10 ball games, but in the sort of the, I don't want to call it the post-Derek White era, but in the games since he's been down, and it's not a ton of them. I think he's missed, 4.5 basketball games? They've lost him. And then they beat Memphis going into the All-Star break. So, he's the guy, and they're a lot better at home than they are on the road, and some of that does coincide. They lost him in the home game where they beat New Orleans. They went on a 4-game road trip and lost all 4, or a 5-game road trip, and then they won the last one. They open up on the road rodeo style with another 3 after the All-Star break in Toronto, and then New York and Brooklyn. New York, an easier one. Brooklyn should be a pretty good test. But if Derek White is really back for those games, I would expect the Spurs to play a lot better. It's a tough road trip, to be fair. Sacramento, Golden State, Portland, Utah, but they got waxed pretty good in almost all of those games. So they need him. They need him to be good. They need him to be solid. They need him to be a big part of what they do. And I would expect him to ramp back up into the mid-30s, provided his foot can handle it. I don't know about top 50, though. That, to me, feels like a stretch. He's shooting 50% on the year. That's a number that could keep up because he doesn't take a ton of three-pointers, but there was a stretch in there where he was shooting like 80%, and we knew that had to come down. He's a decent foul shooter, if unspectacular at the free throw line. But he rebounds, he gets you assists, he'll get you steals, a smattering of blocks. He's a solid top 80 kind of fantasy guy, I think. Top 50 is stretching it. Top 100 is probably the floor. And to me, he's a must-own guy. So, yes, to answer your question, I think you got to have Derek White on your fantasy team. Roddy says, are we chasing Marquise Chris? I would be dropping Ivica Zubac, or is this Anthony Randolph all over again? Marquise Chris is sort of his own monster in this one, in that, like many NBA players, sometimes they just need a change of scenery to get a little bit better. The problem is, and this happens to be a problem for a lot of guys in the NBA that have decent per-minute ability, the per minute is fine, but the total minute will be less so. Leading up into the All-Star break, Marquise played 23, 24, 22, and 28 minutes, and he was putting up decent numbers in that stretch. You know, easily the best stretch he's put up in maybe of his career, just from an overall standpoint. He was top 50 in the week leading up to the All-Star break. But, and this is a very large but, Kevin Love is going to carve into those minutes, and Cedi Osman is going to carve into those minutes as well. Two of the guys that are sort of the big pieces of the Cavaliers' future were out for not all of these games, but for a large portion of them. Remember, Kevin Love is slowly working his way back. He only played in 2 of the 4 games leading up to the break, 6 minutes in one and 16 in the other. The word on the street that, again, we mentioned this last week, Joe Varden, who works out of Cleveland for The Athletic, was tweeting about how Kevin Love was expecting to come out of the break with basically no restrictions. So he'll be conditioning himself hard over the All-Star break and then kind of raring to go. I would assume, and I don't know for certain, I haven't seen any big updates on Cedi Osman, who did play in their last game before the break but had a minutes restriction and played 25 minutes. When he's back up into the mid-30s, because they've just been letting him roll 39, 36, he's obviously a guy that they want to force feed into the lineup. When he's going 35 minutes, so shave off another 10 to 12, and Kevin Love is up from 16 to, I don't know, what do we even think he's going to play? 25 to 30? Instead of 0 in that last ball game, that basically renders poor Marquise Chris the 4th guy in the front court behind Love, Nance, and Cedi. And that's a tough job to have. Because if we just do it from a numbers standpoint, Chris is not going to play small forward. Cedi Osman could play small forward if they absolutely positively had to, but I don't foresee that happening. Yeah, all right, fine. Let's say maybe he could slide down a little bit. Larry Nance and Kevin Love cannot. Definitely cannot. Those minutes have to come at the 4 or the 5, preferably the 5. But what you're looking at there is basically 96 minutes split between 4 guys, where Osman's going to get 30-something, Love is going to get around 30, Nance is going to get 20-something, and that leaves Marquise Chris with like 13 or 14 minutes max, unless they slide Osman down to the 3, where he'll be dealing with guys like David Nwaba, who started at the 3 in their last game before the All-Star break. Nick Stauskas probably could play a little bit of 3. Jordan Clarkson, probably more of a 2, but he could also play a little bit of 3. Do we see any Jaron Blossom game coming in as a 3 or a 4 if they call him up from the G League? So there's a weird little outside path for Marquise Chris to maintain minutes in the 20s, but there's nothing beyond that. There's no way he gets up into the high 20s when Osman and Love are both in there. I mean, if you look at that game before the All-Star break, they went to triple overtime, and Chris saw 27 minutes. If you remove the final 15 minutes of this ball game, well, you're talking about the fact that Osman probably would have been in there for more of it. Nwaba and Zizic both fouled out. Chris actually fouled out in that game. Nance fouled out. Love didn't even play. So I don't want to rain on the parade too hard because I do think there's this weird long shot universe where he could find his way to, let's say, 22 minutes, but he's going to have to be brilliant in those 22 minutes to hold fantasy value, and that's just not something that I'm going to bank on. I do like that he's playing better, though. Good for him. Kyle Anderson, no updates whatsoever. Is it time to drop? I'm going to say no, because to me, when he comes back, he's going to get his job back. Because right now they're playing Justin Holiday, Avery Bradley at the 2 and the 3. Jaren Jackson Jr. is starting at the 4. Ivan Rabb, Jonas Valanciunas are taking minutes at the 5. The only way that this doesn't, well, I don't know. I mean, I think Kyle Anderson's getting his minutes somewhere in there regardless. I mean, even if they have to slide him up to the 4, play Jaren Jackson at the 5, that probably kills Ivan Rabb completely, and then Valanciunas gets his 24 off the bench, and JJJ gets a few at power forward as well. So there's a way where that could work for all of them without killing Justin Holiday and Avery Bradley. But to me, this is a guy they want on the floor. He does those intangibly things, the rebounds, the assists, the steals, the blocks, the good percent from the field in particular. I mean, this is a guy, Slow-Mo was shooting 54%, by the way, this season. He was a top 100 asset after that really slow start. I think he's a guy that you pick up and gamble on because there's a nice ceiling for him, especially as Memphis continues to thin out their list of playmakers. So, no, I don't think it's time to drop, unless we get some terrible news coming out of the All-Star break. He had a visit with a shoulder specialist. We really haven't heard anything additional. I'm thinking they'll probably have to give us something before their game on Friday, and if it's a terrible outlook, then yes, you can probably part ways with him. But if it's, progress is being made, then you hang on. I think he could be a really interesting guy as we come out of this All-Star break. Next question on the list. Who are your top post-All-Star break breakout candidates? Potential league winners and so forth, kind of like a guy like Taurean Prince last year. Well, so the reason this question is almost impossible this season is that in previous years, the guys that were post-break breakout guys were the guys that were going to gain leverage or playing time or opportunity or whatever you want to call it because of the trade deadline. And that's already happened. So to me, there actually isn't going to be a whole lot of stuff that changes after the All-Star break that hadn't already changed going into it. And so with that in mind, you guys actually know most of the guys that I like in that regard. I put them all in that wacky large center list that I built. And, some of the names on that list, obviously Mitchell Robinson, who we've had for forever. Jonas Valanciunas is a guy that's getting a giant bump after the trade deadline. I believe JaVale McGee, I know he had a bad game, is set to have a nice close to the year because they really don't have a whole lot of choice unless he's a disaster. I think Jahlil Okafor is a guy that's going to have a really nice end to the season. Dario Saric is going to have a nice end of the season. We just saw Luke Cornett put together a pretty good ball game. Robin Lopez has been playing better. Enes Kanter. The problem with these guys is that I'm not sure any of them outside of, let's say, Mitchell Robinson, because he was a guy that wasn't drafted in almost any league. He was picked up because, we had you guys picking him up in November, and then he got hurt for a while, and then he was a pickup again when he came back from injury. He, to me, is the guy that was a pickup a few weeks at least before the break, even before the deadline, that is set to be a potential league winner down the stretch. If we're looking for pickups that are league winners, Mitchell Robinson is that guy. He's a top 45 fantasy asset in 9-cat over the last month. In 20 minutes a game, he's shooting 76% from the field, 10.7 rebounds, a steal, and almost 3 blocks per game. Whoa. Monster. Of the guys that were not likely owned going into the trade deadline, and I still can't figure out how Mitchell Robinson is only 48% owned. He's been crazy good. He's just been he's been a wonder, and he should have been owned weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and that's why I was hesitant to even put him on this list of game changers and league winners post All-Star break or post trade deadline. But he's probably going to be the best out of all of them. Of the other guys, Dario Saric, I think you're going to see him probably settle in that top 90 range down the stretch. Jahlil Okafor has an opportunity to potentially be a top 50 guy if anything goes completely haywire with Anthony Davis, but I think you're looking at a top 100 finish for him, even if Anthony Davis stays and attempts to play some basketball game, because we've seen the Pels go big, and he's going to get in there and be a high-usage guy as a sort of a top reserve, even if the Pelicans don't go as big and he's more of a bench guy. So those are probably the names that pop up for me the most right now. I think Maxi Kleba has a chance to be interesting if Dallas can build a little bit of chemistry. He has top 75 upside, and I think you're going to see him settle into that sort of top 110 range floor. So I like him. Bobby Portis is an interesting name on that list. But the league winner to me in all of these pickups over the last month, if we're going to stretch it back that far, is absolutely positively Mitchell Robinson. And I don't know that there's anybody close. He's just guaranteed his 20 minutes, and he's a maniac in his 20 minutes. So he gets my vote. You probably have enough of these, but what do you foresee happening to Anthony Davis? Should owners be trying to sell him post-haste? For buyers, what's the range of centers you'd be looking to give up for him? Well, I mentioned on yesterday's show that I thought you'd see AD come out of the All-Star break and play well for a couple of basketball games. I think that he knows the media attention has been largely negative lately. He knows he's been the villain. I don't think he's all that happy about it, although I think that there's a certain contentedness to what he's doing right now where you get the feeling in talking to Clutch Sports, or that he's been talking to Clutch Sports, and that they're basically telling him, listen, AD, you put this demand out, and I know you want to go to one of these few places, and the only way to do that is to kind of box everybody in. And that's what's happening right now. But I also don't think the NBA wants his drama to overshadow the last 7 weeks of the season. This is stretch run time. This is fighting for playoff seeding. This is the Clowns of the East fighting for the 8 seed. This is the very good Clowns of the West fighting for the 6, 7, 8 seeds. This is a great time to care about the basketball games, and all anybody wants to talk about is Anthony Davis and his shenanigans. And at a certain point, and I don't know if AD is either aware of this or if this is something that his camp is considered, I have to believe that they have. I think they've really game planned this whole thing out. So I'm going to give everybody there the benefit of the doubt and say Anthony Davis's camp is well aware that if they continue to let this play out the way it is, with him putting together poor effort in games and looking kind of sad and listless, that his demands to play that the league has foisted upon the Pelicans, the league is going to back off on that foisting. And they're going to be like, look, AD, you got to give us something to work with here. You got to play hard and have fun, or we can't really force this team to play you because you're distracting everybody and you're ruining the product. And I believe that they're aware of that. How he and Clutch Sports reacts to that is the part that I don't know for sure. If Anthony Davis really wants to play out the stretch, then he knows he's going to have to put together a better couple of games. If he actually wants to be set and shut down, and maybe the thought is the team shuts him down and he can claim that he still wants to play, and then maybe he can save face in some manner. I'm not positive how that line of thought would carry him through. Then maybe he does just sort of doink his way through a few ball games. But I strongly believe he's going to play well coming out of the All-Star break. I think that his camp knows they need him to put together a few better basketball games to convince the league that they can keep forcing the Pelicans to run him out there. He might miss some road games. I don't know. But I think he wants to impress himself upon the hometown fans at least a little bit here before a potential trade in the offseason. And with that, I lead to the answer to your question, which is if you are an AD owner, I would hope for him to put together a couple of good games coming out of the break, and then I would try to trade him. That's the hardest time to trade a guy away, when they're playing well. But that's when you can try to convince somebody, look, he's going to give effort the rest of the way. He's playing 30 minutes a game here for 3 or 4 games in a row. He's putting up nice numbers. These are top 10 value guys. What do you got for me? And then maybe you can grab a top 15 guy in return. If you're a buyer, you want to buy right now when he's looking at his worst. He had an ugly performance in the All-Star game. He had ugly performances leading into the All-Star game. His value is bottoming out at the moment, and everybody's in a full-blown panic about whether or not he's going to play at all the rest of the year, and rightfully so. It's been a bad situation, but I think he's going to have a few good ball games, and if you're a real wheeler and dealer, you trade for him. You go try to get him now for like a top 40 guy, hope that he plays 4 or 5 good games in a row, and then maybe you can flip him for a top 20 guy. Go get him on the cheap, sell him high. Make it a quick one. This is like day trader stuff. The only situation where I think I would recommend buying AD and holding is what I've said before, where you're on the bubble and you got to do something crazy. Otherwise, it's a mess. You got, I'm throwing darts here a little bit. I'm not blindfolded. I'm looking at the target at least a little bit, and I think I have some clue of how this thing's going to go over the next short stretch, but it's still a dart throw. KG says, maybe talk about how we feel about Kawhi sitting out Wednesday but playing in the All-Star game. I mean, this is Kawhi. By the way, last question was from the captain. This is Kawhi Leonard. He's not going to push himself, and the Raptors are going super kid gloves with him because they want him to re-sign, and they're not forcing him to do anything he doesn't want to do, and he wants to play in the All-Star game, but he doesn't really want to play in a whole bunch of games in a row. He's a head case, guys. I mean, it is pretty clear, and we could see that from last year as well. He's doing some damage to his free agency, but he's still one of the best players in the NBA, so he's not doing that much damage to his free agency. And frankly, I don't care. I mean, this is like, you know what you're getting in bed with if you're playing the Kawhi Leonard sweepstakes, and I have to believe the Raptors are well aware. So for me, I just don't care that much. I know. He's missed a handful of games this year, which I know that's upsetting. He's played in 43 games, which among guys that have a per-game value in the top 10 is the fewest. Fewer games than Anthony Davis at this point. In fact, of everybody inside the top 20, there are only a couple of guys that have played less games than Kawhi, and those guys are LeBron, Clint Capella, and Rob Covington. Those guys inside the top 20 on a per-game basis. So he's been a tough guy to own. I make no mistake. He's been a very tough guy to own, but his value has been so impressive that even with all the missed games, he's actually on totals number 17, which is probably pretty close to where he was drafted. No, that's a little bit behind. That's a little behind where he was drafted. You go back, he was getting picked in that 12 to 14 range, and then like right on draft day, he started spiking up into the 7 and 8 range when people started talking themselves into him playing every game. And he hasn't. But yeah, this is sort of what you bought. If you're the Raptors or a fantasy owner, you knew he was going to miss some games, but that per game numbers are so great. You just ride it out. In a roto, he's been awesome. You fill in some of the other games he misses with the hot pickup, maybe even a Raptor when he sits out. Throw Freddie VanVleet in there. Mr. Gunn, I'm receiving Rudy Gobert and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I'm giving up Serge Ibaka and CJ McCollum. Currently in third place, I need rebounds, points, and blocks. This is a pretty specific question, Mr. Gunn, and I'm going to try my best now to broaden this in a way for people other than you to enjoy. Sorry, buddy, I didn't mean to pick on you, but, I mean, this is a mailbag show, so it's not specifically like 2 for 2s and 3 for 3s where you need individual categories. You guys got to know the rules on stuff like this. I shouldn't have to write it out every time I ask for questions. But we're going to do it anyway because, damn it, we'll give the people what they want. But here's what we're going to do. I don't care what categories you're looking for. We're not doing these hyper-specific things on a podcast. Gobert and Gilgeous-Alexander for Serge Ibaka and CJ McCollum. I like the Gobert side in a vacuum. I don't care that Gilgeous-Alexander is basically a drop in 9 category roto these days. He's not playing enough and he's not doing enough. Ibaka and McCollum obviously are both useful fantasy assets, but nobody's touching Rudy Gobert. He's far and away the best player in that group. He's number 16 on the year in 9 category, and the other guys are not that close to that. Ibaka is number 48, and McCollum is number 58. So this is your prototypical 2-for-1. You want the Rudy Gobert side. I don't care, actually, what categories you're looking for, even this late in the game. You already have, and in your specific case, you have Karl-Anthony Towns, Kevin Love, Pascal Siakam in your front court. Adding Rudy Gobert to that mix is a dominant front court now. So that's the side you want. I don't really care what stats you're looking for. I can't make a great argument for a top 50 and a top 60 guy when you could get a top 20 guy on the other side. He's so much more valuable. Asen says, I have Kevin Huerter, Evan Fournier, Gary Harris, and Cody Zeller. Which of these guys is a drop if I wanted to pick up Derek White, Avery Bradley, or Reggie Bullock? Well, Derek White is definitely a pickup, and Kevin Huerter, believe it or not, is probably my drop, but I could also make an argument for Evan Fournier, who just, frankly, hasn't been that great this year. He and Kevin Huerter, oddly, have pretty similar fantasy games. I've been pretty low on Huerter on this podcast. You guys know that. I really haven't changed my stance. Not a massive fan of his fantasy game yet. It might come around down the line, but he's been a low percentage guy even since his opportunity has increased. He's shooting 42% from the field on the season. He's at 73% at the free throw line on the year on a super low volume, so you almost don't even care about that number. He's hitting you some threes. He's getting you a couple of assists, about a steal a game, 1.5 turnovers. It's actually pretty amazing when you compare his numbers to Fournier, who's shooting 43% from the field and 79% at the foul line with almost 2 threes, a little bit of assist, a little bit of points, and about 1 steal per game. They're like the same guy, and Fournier is just a slightly more established version of the two of them. I like Cody Zeller. He's the highest ranked among those 3 guys that I just listed off. Gary Harris, if he was the drop, it would just be because you need someone who's out there playing basketball games. His season numbers are artificially depressed because of how many games he's had to play with lower minutes than usual. And he just hasn't, I don't think he's been healthy this year. I mean, he's shooting far and away a career worst, 42.5% from the field. His 3-point percentage is way down from last year. His minutes are down 5 per game from last season. So that, again, that's a big deal. You basically add like another 15 to 20% to everything he's done. And then he's pretty close to last year's numbers. Steals would be down, but the blocks are up. Rebounds up. Free throws fine. It's just been shooting percentage, which a bit inexplicable other than to say maybe he's just not healthy. So I'm not dropping him because we know Gary Harris has top 50 upside. He's probably not getting there this year, but with a couple of healthy games, he could easily push back inside the top 100. Evan Fournier and Kevin Huerter, I don't know if either of those guys is a top 100 dude the rest of the way. And what I do know is that Derek White, when healthy, is. Avery Bradley, I don't trust. Reggie Bullock, I don't trust. You're leaving those guys on the wire for now. Keywords being for now. Should I drop Evan Fournier for Derek White from Kyle? Well, that's it. It was in reply to that previous question. So, yes, if that was the drop, I would make it. I dropped Fournier a long time ago in a couple of leagues. He's a guy who's only being held as long as he has been because he's scoring 15 points a game. If you looked at all the other categories, he's more or less league average or worse, with a very slight positive in assists. He just hasn't been very good. And a traditional 12-team format, he's a guy that does not need to be fantasy rostered right now. Art says, Chris Dunn, Derek White, or Lonzo Ball. I'm assuming this is basically rest of season. Who are we trusting the rest of the way? I would say Derek White is my favorite of the bunch. Chris Dunn is a shutdown candidate. I think he's going to play, but he's had a rough time in the Jim Boylan offense. The Bulls actually looked better with him off the floor. He's sitting right around the top 100. I'm not sure he's going to get a whole lot higher than that in 9-cat. I would have expected his field goal percentage to be a little bit better, which is maybe a pipe dream because he's pretty close to what he was last year, but he doesn't shoot from the perimeter very often. Just a lot of mid-range shots, and they haven't been going down. But the blocks have been okay, the steals have been okay, the assists and rebounds have been all right. The thing that's been hurting has been basically the fact that he's turning the ball over a fair amount, and his field goal percent didn't increase the way that we kind of hoped it would. But this might be Chris Dunn, guys. This may just be the guy he is. So I like Derek White the most, Dunn the second most, and then Lonzo Ball, who was playing well prior to his injury, but he was also playing well prior to his injury with no LeBron and no Rondo. Chris says, how about player production versus playoff schedules? That is Jonas Valanciunas with a 2-game week versus Thomas Bryant or Jeff Green with a 4-game week. Well, if it really comes down to that, you want the guy with a 4-game week because it's pretty easy to do the math on that. You just say, all right, well, is this one guy going to average double what the other guy is? Probably not. Unless you're talking about, a top 50 guy versus like a top 200 guy. But you just gave me a top, I think Valanciunas is going to be probably top 50, top 60 the rest of the way. Thomas Bryant, Jeff Green, those guys are both going to be around top 100. 4 games of a top 100 guy is better than 2 games of a top 60 guy. It's not close. The 4-gamer is the way you go. But at the same time, you want to weigh a few things against one another. It's not like you're going to drop JV. You kind of, I would guess you want him for other playoff weeks. So how do you build your team in that spot? Sometimes you just need to wear it a little bit. Or if you're in real trouble, and I haven't looked to see exactly what days the games are in that week, you could probably, if there's like a game at the beginning of the week and at the very end, you play JV for that game on a, Tuesday, and then you drop him and pick somebody up who's going to play twice on, say, Wednesday and Friday, and then if JV played again on Saturday or Sunday, someone else is probably going to get him, but maybe you could pick him back up. So this is not something that I'm planning for yet until we get closer to the playoffs. There's so much upside with a guy like Valanciunas right now. What are you thinking? I mean, you're gonna drop him? I doubt it. He's going to be playing too well. What you could do is try to trade him for someone who's in his same range. Trade him for a top 75 guy to a team that maybe isn't as worried about that playoff week. If you really are concerned, trade him for a top 75 guy who's going to have a 4-game week in there. And then maybe everybody wins. Michael says, I have a super draft next month for all 3 sports. Where do you think Zion will be drafted in fantasy this upcoming year? Woof. That's a tough one. I'm going to guess that he goes in the Karl Anthony Towns range of his rookie year, which was somewhere in the 50 range. Like a DeAndre Ayton, he went in that 35 to 45 range. You don't often see rookies go higher than that. He's going to be awesome. There are still going to be growing pains. There's going to be fouling issues that happen with him. There's a very real chance for him to come into the NBA and be a top 40 guy right out of the chute. So I would guess somewhere between 36 and 60. So end of 3rd round to end of 5th round. Call it a 4th or 5th round guy. That's my guess for next year. The buzz might be so crazy that he goes higher. And if that's the case, then you probably didn't want to wait and spend that pick on him anyway. He might be fun. Oh, it might be fun. But again, you're looking for value, and sometimes guys just sort of price themselves out. And finally, from J-Ball, Joe Ingles or Derek White, rest of the way, 9-cat roto. Derek White. Give me Derek White. Ingles is having a strange year, and I don't know that that's about to change anytime soon. He has not looked great. He shot the ball better his last 3 games to get his season field goal percentage up to 43.9%, but that's still down almost 3% from last year when he was coasting along with all those 3-pointers going down. His 3-pointers are down. He's taking fewer of them this year by a little bit, and he's making fewer of them this year. His free throw percentage is down. Rebounds are down. Assists are about the same. Turnovers are up. Steals are up a tiny bit season over season. The thing that's killing you is the field goal percent and the free throw percent. Those things I don't think are going to change over the last 7 weeks if they haven't changed yet. Whereas with a guy like Derek White, he's ranked behind Joe Ingles overall in the year, but remember he had a lot of games where he was playing in the low 20s in minutes, and that number didn't start to truly increase until he was about a good month into playing. And when he did, he was better than Ingles in that top 115 range. So give me Derek White. And I thought we were about done, but it actually looks like one question slipped in here right before I finished recording. David says, who will finish the year stronger in head-to-head at 9-cat leagues, Nico Mirotic or Jason Tatum? So I guess this is then eliminating what they've done to this point, because obviously Nico was on a per-game basis performing better than Tatum prior to his injury. But Jason, far and away the healthier of the two guys. I don't know. Actually, has Tatum missed a single game all year to this point? He's played in 58 for Boston. I think that might be about where they're at. So he's been number 29 by totals on the year. Nico has been number 147 by totals. He's played in only 32 games on the year. I believe Nico Mirotic is going to sit in that top 80 range for Milwaukee. Tatum has been cruising along here as a top 50 guy on a per-game basis. So this one is Tatum in a runaway. I don't think it's close. He's the healthier of the two. He's not in a new situation. I know I've been pretty down on Celtics this year just because with the too many mouths to feed situation outside of Kyrie Irving and Tatum, who's been relatively similar, I think, to kind of what we were looking for last year. His scoring is up this season. You know, he's just taking more shots per game, but percentages are relatively similar year over year, and rebounding a little bit better. He hasn't made that massive, top 25 type jump, but he's very safely a top 45, top 50 guy at the very worst the rest of the way. And with Nico, what we saw him doing in New Orleans was basically a best-case scenario. That was top 25 for a stretch. He ended up sitting in that top 30 range. He goes to a spot where it's definitely not a best-case scenario. He was the number 3 option on the Pels, some nights the number 2 option, and in Milwaukee, at best, he's the 4th option. And at worst, he's the 5th, probably, or 6th. You could even call him the 6th option. You got Giannis, you got Middleton, you got Bledsoe easily in front of him. Malcolm Brogdon, Brook Lopez could also end up in front of him in the pecking order. That's not a good spot to be in. Again, I think you're looking at Tatum by probably at least 2 rounds, maybe more like 3 of value, and a guy that obviously fluke things happen, but more durable at this point. He played in 80 games for Boston last year. He's cruising along. He's on pace for 80 again this season. And Nico's not. He's on pace for 50-something, if that. So this one, to me, is not that close. It's not that close at all. And those are the mailbag questions for today. So we can go ahead and put a pin in this one. Thank you for asking so many good ones. Much appreciated as always. You guys are the content today, and that's cool because that meant that I didn't have to dig for something weird to talk about. We just got to talk about the things that you guys wanted to. We'll do another one of these for sure before the season ends, and then we'll obviously have some in the offseason as well, especially after we get into the free agency stretch of things. Briefly here, as long as it's on our minds, I don't know if you guys remember how things go in the offseason, and there are still many of you that are kind of first-time season-long listeners. Where our listenership is up about 40% year over year, which is pretty sweet. So for the 40% of you that were not around last year, the offseason, we do shows 5 days a week, all off-season long, and we basically just break down all of the teams, all of the conferences, all of the divisions, one by one over the course of basically the first 2 months of the offseason. Then you got about a month of free agency, and then you get into like a month of draft prep, basically, or more. You got mock drafts, you got things, late trades, other late free agency signings. It's awesome, and we do so much prep in the offseason that draft time is easy. You don't have that panic set in when you just sort of know everything that's happening going into it. So stick with us year-round here at Fantasy NBA. We'll never shut her down. We're crazy like that. Again, thank you very much for all the questions today. This was the mailbag edition, Tuesday mailbag of Fantasy NBA Today, brought to you by Hawaiian Isles, Kona Coffee Company, and Hoop Ball. I am Dan Vespers. Again, tomorrow on Wednesday's show, we'll start to look ahead a little bit, games coming up out of the All-Star break and kind of what are the big arcs that we'll be looking at. Also, we've got our DFS contest open for Thursday of this week. I'd really appreciate it if you guys checked it out. I'm guessing, and I've said this before, I don't think this is particularly good marketing on my part, but we're going to do it anyway. I don't think that we're going to fill the 125-person room this week coming out of the All-Star break, and my guess is that as we move forward in the season, teams start to get eliminated, people stop paying closer attention. The listenership always goes down as you hit March, and it goes down again as you hit April, and then May and June, nobody other than the true crazies are listening to the podcast. And you know who you are. So my guess is that the listenership and the playership in, if you want to, whatever you want to call it, in that DFS contest is actually going to go down a little bit. So you're going to get into a better spot to play in the contest. The prize is the same. There's $375 up for grabs. The top 20 teams take it home. If only, say, 85 teams play instead of 110, you have a better chance of winning. It's simple as that. As the player pool gets smaller, if the prizes stay the same, your odds improve. The ROI is better. There you go. So come join us. The link is on Twitter. And if you'd like to get on our mailing list, you can do so by posting your email address in the Hoopball forum thread dedicated to our weekly DFS contest. Beat the experts with DraftKings. That, again, is on Thursday this week. There are no games on Wednesday. It'll go back to Wednesday the following week. Beat the great Mike Apotria, who we will talk to later on this week. Start to get ready for those games. We might even do that tomorrow. Maybe we'll bump it up a day just to get the jump on it, and then we can do like an on Twitter update on Thursday with late breaking news. That might be kind of a fun way to do it. I'll talk to Mike. We'll see what we got going on. Figuring it out on the fly. That's what we do here at Fantasy NBA Today. At Dan Vespers on Twitter, at Hoopball Tweets, at Hoopball Fantasy. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody. The layoff continues. I'm bored. I hope you're not. We'll talk to you soon.
This has been a Hoopball presentation.